Welcome to my channel. My name is Alta. I review movies and TV shows. I also do a little bit of travel. In terms of movies and TV shows, I do my reviews through a sociological lens, looking at how race, gender, and sexuality, among other things, are represented, whether these stories are reinforcing archetypes and stereotypes or subverting them. And even if I don't mention anything about race, gender, sexuality in my reviews, that doesn't mean that those things weren't in consideration. It just may be that I have nothing to say regarding any of those things. So we are gathered here today to talk about The Supremes at Earl's All You Can Eat, which is now available for streaming on Hulu. It is based on a book that I have not read. Typically, I don't read the books before watching these movies, but there is a book in case you're interested in reading it. But also, it's to provide context to anyone who watched the movie and also read the book that I have no knowledge about what is in the book. So, The Supremes at Earl's All You Can Eat is directed by Tina Mabry, and it stars Anjanou Ellis-Taylor as Odette, Sanaa Lathan as Barbara Jean, and Uzo Aduba as Clarice. Young Odette is played by Kiana Simone. Young Barbara Jean is played by Tati Gabrielle, and young Clarice is played by Abigail Achiri. It also stars Mekhi Phifer, Julian McMahon, aka Cole Turner, the source of all evil from my favorite show ever, Charmed. It also stars Russell Hornsby, who was in Lincoln Heights. Who remembers Lincoln Heights? Loved him in Lincoln Heights. And it also stars Vondi Curtis Hall. So, The Supremes at Earl's All You Can Eat is about three women who become best friends as teenagers in 1968, I believe. Yes, in 1968. They become best friends after one of their mothers die. And it follows them through dating, meeting the loves of their lives, and into adulthood, which takes place primarily in 1999. The current time is 1999. So it takes us from, them blossoming as young women to them dealing with a lot of hard changes and revelations as adult women. And it's about the bonds of friendship, the magic of friendship, the magic of sisterhood. There's a quote in the movie that says, "Love is our glue," which is very much beautifully portrayed in the movie. This movie left me feeling very warm and fuzzy about friendship, about these incredible women that we got to know. And now I want to delve into some specifics. So if you haven't seen the movie, spoilers ahead, you can save this and come back after you've watched. So this review, I'm going to go character by character. I think overall, the writing in this movie is very, very strong. The three women, both the younger versions and the adult versions, have great chemistry. I absolutely buy, especially the adult versions, I buy that these women have known each other all of their lives, over 30 years, and they have witnessed each other through happy times and bad times, and they're there for each other. Love all of that. So I'm going to go by character, starting with Odette, and then we'll talk about Clarice, and then we will talk about Barbara Jean, and then I will end with the one low light, one thing that really didn't work for me in this movie. So, starting with Odette. Odette was born in, first of all, let me just say that in terms of the three women, I think that, and the three girls, I think that Odette is the soul of the friendship group. I think that Clarice is the hearth of the friendship group. And I think that Barbara Jean is the heart of the friendship group because they come together. They're always coming together to, help Barbara Jean and speak life into her. So I think she's the heart, the little sister of the group. And I think that Clarice is really grounded. She doesn't need much looking after, but she's the sound voice. She may go with you if you're getting into some trouble, as long as the trouble is not too scandalous. And Odette, of course, is the soul who grounds the girls, the women, grounds the friendship, and never loses sight of who you are, even though you may lose sight of who you are. So Odette was born in a sycamore tree, And she is brave, she is fearless, she is the friend that you don't want to disappoint. She's also the friend that you call as soon as you get into a horrible spot. And in short, she's the mom of the group. I looked up the symbolism of sycamore trees, since that's a big part of Odette's framework. And I found on the website classroom.synonym.com that one of the things it says is that sycamore trees, are a symbol of clarity based on this Bible story. And that is Odette. Like I said, she never loses sight of who her friends are and what is best for them. She also never loses sight of who she is. So here's the thing about Odette. Odette's shit don't stink, right? Odette is a perfect character. Odette has no flaws. She picked the perfect man, a man who loves her and cares about her and supports her, a man who loves her impatience for BS. That's great. She always makes good choices. So Odette is just there to judge the choices of her friends. Now, a character like that can be very boring. A character like that can be extremely uninteresting. You have nothing going on and you're basically just there providing commentary on the other characters who actually have ups and downs in their lives. Odette doesn't deal with anything until, she gets hit with the diagnosis. No one judges Odette because, like, the other two girls don't judge Odette. The other two women don't judge Odette because seemingly their lives are such bigger messes than Odette's. Although I will say, I don't think Clarice's life is that like scandalous. Her life is just not that scandalous. Barbara Jean, on the other hand, girlfriend went through a lot, and we'll get to her. But interestingly enough, Odette is my favorite character. The magic of Ingenue Ellis Taylor, the magic of the writing, because I do think the script is very strong. The chemistry of the women, just their dynamic. Odette is my favorite character. That said, though, I would have liked to learn more about Odette in this, or I would have liked to have seen Odette be written more like the other two characters, simply because for Barbara Jean and Clarice, there is such a direct comparison made between them and their moms, right? Clarice's mom was all about appearances. She had her baby at an all-white hospital, and she was the first one to do it in their town. And, she was all about saving face no matter what that meant. And Clarice, they didn't, hammer that point home, but Clarice ended up marrying a man because she cared about family, and I'm assuming she stayed for as long as she did because of the presentation of being, a well-rounded family, not being a divorcee. Maybe I'm projecting because they didn't say this directly, but there is, Odette and her voiceover made a direct comparison between Clarice and her mom. Barbara Jean and her mom, that was hammered home. Her mom slept with multiple men, doesn't know who the father is. She had her baby in a strip club or just a club. Either way, it wasn't at a hospital and it wasn't at home. Her mom drank a lot. Barbara Jean drinks a lot, all that. I think during the argument, Clarice did tell Odette she's just like her mother, but what does that even mean? At the very beginning, when they're teenagers, it is said that that Odette is as gruff, no nonsense, we'll call a thing like her mom. But no one criticizes her for that. No one, judges her for that. I would have liked to have, and we didn't even really know much about Odette's mom other than she had her baby in a sycamore tree. She went to see a witch. And so that's the other thing. Odette is not spiritual at all. Like, spirituality is not something that's a part of her character. Yes, she has this whole thing about being born in a sycamore tree, but it's just the framework of her character. Like, we don't see her use that fact to guide her in her life. We don't see, is she spiritual because of that? We know she's not, she don't really do church, or at least she has a strong opinion about church mess. You know what I mean? We don't get to know this about Odette, whereas we know that Clarice, she absolutely does go to church. Her church family, her church community was telling her to work things out with her husband, despite the fact that he cheated on her. I would have liked a little bit more details about Odette. Like the fact that like she wanted to be a nurse. For half the movie, I was like, I would see her come home in her uniform. I'm like, is she a nurse? Like, did that happen? Only to find out that no, she absolutely is not. She's a cafeteria worker. How did she feel about that? You know, like Clarice, I think, or maybe it's Barbara Jean, like called her out on that during the big argument, and she blamed them, but it's like, I don't know, like there wasn't much like internal processing for Odette, only because she's so busy judging her friends. And then the one thing that hit her was the cancer, which is an external thing, but it didn't lead to her like analyzing anything. Now, me as the viewer, I raise an eyebrow at the fact that Odette's first instinct when she gets this bad news is to hold it close to her chest and not tell anyone. She doesn't seek comfort from anyone. That's an eyebrow raise, but I'm just the viewer. Like I have no impact on Odette's like journey or her characterization, and nobody really, you know, they were surprised, but no one's like, oh, you know, and keeping things close to the chest, we can say that's a characterization of being the strong friend, the one who always has it together, being the mother of the group. But again, that's not something that's internal to the story or internal to Odette's character. It's just something she does. Then it comes out, you know, her husband finds out and her friends find out, and they just like immediately comfort her and we move on. But like I said, Odette is my favorite. I love the symbolism of this character being born in a tree. And so trees are deeply rooted, trees are sturdy, and Odette herself is also very grounded, very rooted in who she is, very sturdy. I love the idea of her going through life because she was born in the air or off the ground. She goes through life not having any like deeply rooted fears until this cancer thing strikes her. And I, of course, love that she survived. Listen, I was ready for Odette to go. During that scene at the, you know, the trunk of the tree, I was tearing up. She was being dramatic. And then that thing bonked her in the head and I busted out laughing. They are so wrong for doing that. So, moving on to our girl Clarice, played by Uzo Aduba. Let me just say that at various points throughout this movie, I was looking at Uzo Aduba like, this woman is so beautiful. Clarice is actually they didn't do with Clarice what I thought they were going to do, which is that because Odette in her voiceover talked about like Clarice's mom being so concerned with appearances, I thought Clarice was going to be so much more about respectability and what's proper and stuff like that, but they didn't do that with her. So Clarice's main thing as an adult is the discovery that her husband cheated on her, so that's like the big thing. Under that though is the fact that she spent her life, that marriage, slowly like dimming. Clarice has a very powerful line that she says to the young woman that her husband cheated on her with, which is that he's gonna take the place where your heart used to be. That's powerful. And so the thing that stands out the most for me about Clarice's storyline is after Odette has the pep talk with Raymond, he goes to Clarice to, you know, apologize. And I was turned off. I was like, oh, for real? Like, how are you guys gonna do that after you had Odette talking about like, you know, church mess, and essentially I think was commentary on like the whole like, oh, he cheated but take him back because, you know, sanctity of marriage or whatever, the bonds of marriage and whatever. So I was very like displeased. So I was very happy when they revealed that Clarice played him. Yes, I love that. I love that they what I call prioritizing her character above the message, the toxic message of, you know, married no matter what. I was very pleasantly surprised. They got me because I believed that Clarice was gonna forgive that man just because he made a poster, you know, for a concert. No, our girl's gonna go to New York and, you know, start living her dream that she, at one point in her youth, felt that was less of a dream than being a wife and mother. And she also said she was going to follow Raymond across the country to play football. We never even found out if Raymond actually played professional football. But whatever. Clarice's story, and Clarice as a character, like I said, Clarice is pretty stable. She's the second most stable after Odette. And the trigger for the drama in her life isn't all that scandalous. Her husband cheated, that happens, run of the mill sort of drama. But I do love the way Uzo played Clarice, and I love like the part that Clarice played in the friendship. Moving on to our girl Barbara Jean. Barbara Jean had too much going on. And so that's why I want to first talk about, two things that strike me about Barbara Jean's story. Number one, the argument. Capital T, capital A. In the argument, Barbara Jean tells the women, she tells the women, because, Barbara Jean drowns her sorrows and her pain in alcohol. She is someone who struggles with drinking alcohol. She's an alcoholic. So during the argument, Barbara Jean tells the women that they need to stop judging her because they have stop judging how she copes because they have no idea what it's like to bury a son in the ground, put your son in the ground, and then lose your husband. And then Dad came back and was like, you think you have a monopoly on grief? You think you're the only one who has hard days? My cancer, medication stopped working. And I'm like, no, Dad, no. Actually, Barbara Jean does have the market cornered on grief and hard days. She had a stepfather who molested her. She had a mother who allowed that to happen and who I'm sure was emotionally neglectful. She lost her damn son, which I'll get to. And then she lost her husband, the wonderful, wonderful stand-up man, Lester. You didn't experience any hardship, Odette, until you got this cancer diagnosis. I'm sorry. Like, you and Clarice have had it good compared to Barbara Jean. So Odette was out of pocket for that retort, for that reply. I think Barbara Jean was absolutely correct. Now, Barbara Jean needs to go to AA. She needs help. She's going to drive herself into, an early grave if she don't get a handle on it. Also, Barbara Jean, couldn't be with the man she loved because she chased him away. She got attacked by a racist white... Anyways, market cornered on trauma. So, let's talk about Lester, because that's the second thing. Barbara Jean lost her child. This movie made me cry twice. The first being that scene where Barbara Jean lost her child. And I don't remember anymore what the second... It wasn't when Odette was, dying at the tree. That I was tearing up, but I didn't tears didn't spill. I don't remember what the second thing... Maybe it was when Odette was at the tree. Anyways, no. The second thing that made me cry was at the hospital when Odette was saying what sounded like, parting words to her friends and her community. And I do like how Raymond and James, these people, Lester too, and Ray, they all grew up together. I really love that. And Big Earl and Little Earl. So Barbara Jean lost her child. When Lester wanted to go dole out vigilante justice, that struck a chord with me. The fact that he could not. The fact that, I think it was Raymond who cautioned him against doing that. You can't go putting your hands on this white man who just killed your kid. Imagine. And it just made me think about the fact that, Lester couldn't dole out vigilante justice because that would have put him and Barbara Jean and quite possibly every Black person in that town in danger. And it made me think about the types of stories we don't get. The types of Black stories we don't get. Not that they're not written, not that they don't exist, but that they're not pushed. They don't get greenlit, which is the story of the police couldn't help me, so I'm going to take the law into my own hands. We don't get those types of stories about Black people. And if anybody should be writing these stories, if any of those stories should be hitting the big screen, it should be ones written by Black people. I do believe there's a story like that exists and that came out on Netflix or something. I never watched it. But there's not a prevalence of those stories hitting our screens. And then it led me to thinking about how a lot of our stories, especially ones that are, back in the day, are like, I don't know, should I say like burdened with portraying realism? Take this story for instance. It's set in the 60s, right? And then by the time Barbara Jean, because it was 1968 when we first met them, by the time Barbara Jean's kid was that old, because he looked like he may have been maybe 7, 8 years old, maybe 9. So we're in the early 70s. We had an earlier scene of Ray's brother chasing these black teens with his car and terrorizing them. This story features racism. And it's like, sometimes I think about how that's like a burden that black storytellers had, because imagine if this, and I know this is based on a book, but imagine if this story did not feature racism. Imagine if it was just these black people in this all black town, and we know that it's we know why it's an all black town, because we see what time it is, but imagine if we just kept white people at bay. Like, we just didn't feature them. We didn't feature the racism. Would that make it a fantasy, And then just before recording this review, when I was finalizing my notes, I was thinking about the fact that, like, you have the opposite, because, two Americas, right? You have the other side of the coin when white people write stories about, or set in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 40s, and you just don't tend to get this. They just tell their stories. There's an absence of black people, for sure. And if there are black people, they'll feature a but like, they don't feature the realism of racism, of them being racist, right? Particularly, like, imagine a story imagine a world where, like, white people did do this, right? Where their stories were based on reality, where they were burdened by reality, where every story, or the majority of their stories set in the 50s, not made during the 50s, but set in the 50s in modern day, featured the white family, no black people present, but white family talking about black people in a racist way, teaching their kids racism. The brother talking about, so I'm gonna go out and terrorize black people, in a black neighborhood. Oh, now mom and dad, I'm about to like go get in my car and chase down some black teens. Imagine like them like passing around a family heirloom that grandma got when she was 9 years old, when her parents took her to a lynching in the 30s. Imagine if white people were not as concerned, but if it was even a thing in their mind to display where they came from, right? And what the fuck they were doing during that time, and what they were talking about, and what their families were talking about. So like I said, our stories are burdened with realism. And I guess, and if we didn't have things like, the scenes we had, like Barbara Jean's damn son being mowed down by a racist white man, and them being unable to get justice because the system it's a white supremacist system that condones that kind of violence. If we didn't have that, our story would be, this story would be a fantasy, like a fantasy. And I was thinking about how, like, by white people, or white storytellers not including this and not feeling the need to, their stories are fantasies, right? Absence of the ugliness that they were perpetuating and teaching their kids during these time periods. Just a thought that came to me, and that was triggered by watching Lester be, I guess, dehumanized in a sense, like not having the freedom to go get justice for his son, even in this fictional story. So yes, those two things stood out to me about Barbara Jean's story. Yes, she has the market cornered on grief, and also Lester loved her so much, but the injustice and how that injustice from real life comes out in our storytelling as Black people. So that's all I have on the characters. Now, the one thing that didn't work for me in this movie, like I said, they got me with Clarice. That was going to be the second thing that didn't work for me, but they fixed that. The one thing that didn't work for me is actually the flashback when they showed that Barbara Jean went to see Ray, gave him whiplash with telling him he had a son, and then asked him to go kill his brother. And Ray was like, all right, yeah, I'll go do it. Because, like, I automatically love our son. And it's like, yes, I get him automatically, like, loving their... But it's like the man had no time to process between being told he has a son. And the way she delivered the news was so cruel. She just go, oh, do you think that your brother killed Adam because he's yours? And he's like, what? And she's like, what? I just thought that, like, since, like, I felt him, that you may have known as well. Like, what? That was the weakest part of the movie for me. Like, y'all could have figured out another way to introduce this idea of Barbara Jean going through her whole life thinking she had blood on her hand. Like, weak point. But overall, I do love the movie. I give it a 4 out of 5. I don't know. Like, I don't think it's a 5 out of 5. It's a 4 out of 5. Let me know what you think of the Supremes at Earl's All You Can Eat.